The rain hammered against the coffee shop windows as I stared at my phone, reading Jake's text for the 5th time. Can we meet up? I have something important to tell you. My stomach twisted with that familiar mixture of hope and dread that had become my constant companion over the past 3 years of friendship with him. Jake Morrison had been my best friend since we met in our freshman dorm at State University. He was everything I wasn't: confident, athletic, effortlessly charming with everyone he met. I was the quiet one, the one who preferred books to parties, who spent Friday nights editing the campus newspaper while he was out with whatever girl had caught his attention that week. Despite our differences, we'd clicked immediately, bonding over late-night conversations about everything from philosophy to our shared love of terrible horror movies. The problem was, somewhere along the way, I'd fallen completely and hopelessly in love with him. It wasn't something I'd planned or wanted. Jake was straight, had always been straight, and made no secret of his appreciation for women. I'd watched him date a parade of girlfriends throughout college, each relationship lasting a few months before he'd grow bored and move on. He confided in me about his dating troubles, asked for advice about how to handle breakups, completely oblivious to the fact that every word was like a knife twisting in my chest. I'd gotten good at hiding it. I'd perfected the art of being the supportive best friend, the one who listened without judgment, who offered a shoulder to lean on when his latest relationship imploded. I'd even started dating other guys, partly to convince myself I could move on, partly to throw Jake off the scent if he ever started to suspect. Not that he seemed to notice much about my romantic life anyway. Now, sitting in our usual corner booth at Grounded, the little coffee shop near campus where we'd spent countless hours studying and talking, I watched Jake approach through the rain-streaked window. Even soaked from the storm, he looked good. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, his t-shirt clinging to his broad shoulders. I forced myself to look away before he caught me staring. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "This weather is insane." "No problem," I replied, trying to keep my voice casual. "I ordered your usual. Large coffee, black, extra shot." He smiled, that easy grin that had been making my heart skip beats for years. "You know me too well, Marcus." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, Jake warming his hands around his coffee cup while I tried to read his expression. There was something different about him today, a tension I wasn't used to seeing. Jake was usually so relaxed, so sure of himself. Today he seemed almost nervous. "So," I said finally, unable to stand the suspense any longer, "what's this important thing you wanted to tell me?" Jake's eyes darted around the coffee shop, checking to make sure we weren't being overheard. The place was nearly empty due to the storm, just us and an elderly man reading a newspaper in the far corner. Still, Jake leaned forward and lowered his voice. "This is going to sound crazy," he began, running a hand through his damp hair. "And I need you to promise me you won't freak out or think I'm losing my mind." My heart started beating faster. In all our years of friendship, I'd never seen Jake this serious about anything. "Okay," I said slowly. "I promise." He took a deep breath, his hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "You know how I've been acting kind of weird lately? More distant, turning down plans, that sort of thing?" I nodded. I had noticed, actually. Over the past few weeks, Jake had been different. He'd canceled our usual movie nights, made excuses when I suggested grabbing dinner, seemed distracted even when we were together. I'd assumed he was dealing with stress from his senior thesis or maybe seeing someone new he hadn't told me about yet. "Well, there's a reason for that," Jake continued. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you something, and honestly, I'm still not sure I have the right words." The knot in my stomach tightened. This was it, I thought. He'd figured out how I felt about him. 3 years of carefully guarded secrets, and somehow he'd seen through my act. I braced myself for the awkward conversation that was about to follow, the one where he'd let me down easy and we'd both pretend things could go back to normal afterward. "The thing is," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I think I might be gay." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs, felt the world tilt sideways. Of all the things I'd been expecting him to say, this wasn't even on the list. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "What?" I managed to croak out. Jake's face flushed red. "I know how it sounds. I know what you're thinking. Jake Morrison, the guy who's dated half the sorority girls on campus, suddenly thinks he's gay? But I can't stop thinking about it, Marcus. I can't stop thinking about guys, about what it would be like to be with a guy instead of a girl." My mind was reeling. This couldn't be happening. This was some kind of cosmic joke, the universe's cruelest trick. For 3 years, I tortured myself over wanting someone I could never have, and now he was sitting across from me, telling me he might actually be available after all. "I don't understand," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. You've always been with women. You've never shown any interest in guys. That's just it, Jake said, leaning forward intently. I thought I was interested in women. I mean, I could perform, you know? I could go through the motions. But looking back, I don't think I was ever really attracted to them. Not the way I thought I should be. He paused, taking a shaky sip of his coffee. It started a few months ago. I was with Sarah, remember her? The blonde from my economics class? We were fooling around, and suddenly I just couldn't do it anymore. I kept thinking about other things, about guys I'd seen at the gym or around campus. I realized I'd been doing that for a while, actually. Using fantasies about men to get through sex with women. I felt like I was drowning. Every word Jake spoke was pulling me deeper into a whirlpool of confusion and desperate hope. This was everything I'd ever wanted to hear from him, but it felt too surreal to be true. Why are you telling me this? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Jake's eyes met mine, and I saw vulnerability there I'd never seen before. Because you're my best friend. Because I trust you more than anyone else in the world. And because... He trailed off, looking down at his hands. Because what? Because I think I might have feelings for you. The coffee shop fell completely silent except for the sound of rain against the windows and the distant hum of the espresso machine. I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience, like I was watching this conversation happen to someone else. Jake, I said carefully, you're straight. You've always been straight. You're probably just confused, or going through some kind of phase, or... I'm not confused, he interrupted, his voice firm. I've been thinking about this for months, Marcus. I've been thinking about you for months. The way you laugh at my stupid jokes, the way you get that little crease between your eyebrows when you're concentrating, the way you always know exactly what to say when I'm having a bad day. I've been thinking about what it would be like to kiss you, to hold you, to be with you in ways that are definitely not straight. I stared at him, speechless. This was Jake, my Jake, the same person who'd spent 3 years telling me about his conquest with women, asking for my advice about girls, completely oblivious to my feelings. How was this possible? I know this is a lot, Jake continued when I didn't respond. And I know it's probably weird, hearing this from me after all this time. But I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I had to tell you. How long? I asked quietly. How long what? How long have you been thinking about me this way? Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the storm. Remember last semester, when you got that stomach bug and I came over to take care of you? You were so sick, completely out of it, and I spent the whole night making sure you were okay. At one point, you were half asleep and you grabbed my hand and told me I was the best thing in your life. I remembered that night. I'd been delirious with fever, barely conscious, but I vaguely recalled Jake sitting beside my bed, bringing me water and checking my temperature. I looked down at you, Jake continued, and I had this overwhelming urge to kiss you. Not in a friendly way, not in a taking care of my sick buddy way, but in a way that scared the hell out of me. I told myself it was just the stress of seeing you so sick, that I was just grateful you were okay. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got stronger. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure Jake could hear it. Jake, I know this is probably not what you want to hear, he said quickly. I know you're gay, and I know you've probably got your own thing going on. I saw you with that guy from your journalism class a few weeks ago, David, or whatever his name was. You two looked pretty cozy. I almost laughed at the irony. David was a friend, nothing more, but I'd been trying to make Jake jealous by flirting with him in public. Apparently, it had worked, just not in the way I'd intended. Jake, I said again, but he held up a hand to stop me. Let me finish, okay? I need to get this all out before I lose my nerve. He took a deep breath. I don't know what I am exactly. I don't know if I'm gay or bi or just confused. All I know is that I can't stop thinking about you, and I can't keep pretending that what I feel for you is just friendship. I've never felt this way about anyone before, male or female. You're the first person who's ever made me want to figure out who I really am. The rain outside had intensified, turning the windows into rivers of water that distorted the world beyond. I felt like I was in a bubble, cut off from reality, existing in this moment where everything I'd ever wanted was suddenly within reach. I don't expect you to say anything right now, Jake continued. I know this is a lot to process. I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest with you, because keeping this secret was killing me. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to reconcile this vulnerable, uncertain version of Jake with the confident, straight best friend I'd known for years. His hands were shaking slightly as he gripped his coffee cup. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. This wasn't some casual revelation or experiment. This was Jake, terrified and brave and completely sincere, laying his heart bare for me. "Can I ask you something?" I said finally. He nodded. "That night you took care of me when I was sick. You said you wanted to kiss me. What stopped you?" Jake's laugh was shaky. "Fear, mostly. Fear that I was losing my mind, that I was imagining things that weren't there. Fear that if I acted on it, I'd ruin the best friendship I've ever had. Fear that you'd look at me like I was some kind of freak who couldn't figure out his own sexuality. And now I'm still scared," he admitted. "But I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to tell you the truth." I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. His skin was warm despite the cold rain, and I felt him relax slightly at the contact. "Jake," I said softly, "there's something I need to tell you too." He looked up at me, hope and fear warring in his expression. "I've been in love with you since sophomore year." The words hung in the air between us, years of pent-up emotion finally given voice. Jake's eyes widened, his mouth falling open slightly. "What?" "I've been in love with you for 3 years," I repeated, the words coming easier now that they were out. "Every day, watching you with other people, listening to you talk about your dates, pretending to be happy for you when inside I was dying. I've been pretending to be your supportive best friend while secretly wishing you'd wake up one day and realize I was right there, waiting for you." Jake stared at me in shock. "But you never said anything. You never gave me any sign. How could I?" "You were straight, Jake. Completely, obviously straight. I wasn't going to ruin our friendship by confessing feelings you could never return. I figured it was better to have you as a friend than not have you at all. All this time," Jake whispered, "we've both been hiding the same thing." Apparently so. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our mutual confession settling between us. 3 years of secret longing, 3 years of careful pretense, and it turned out we'd both been fighting the same battle. "So what happens now?" Jake asked quietly. It was a good question. Everything had changed in the span of 20 minutes, but I wasn't sure what that meant for us going forward. Jake was still figuring out his sexuality, still uncertain about who he was and what he wanted. I'd been sure of my feelings for years, but that didn't make this any less complicated. "I don't know," I said honestly. "This is all pretty overwhelming. Tell me about it." Jake turned his hand palm up under mine, interlacing our fingers. The gesture was small but intimate, more physical contact than we'd ever shared as friends. "Can I ask you something now?" "Of course. That day last month when we were watching a movie at your apartment, and I fell asleep on your couch. I woke up, and you were just sitting there, looking at me with this expression I couldn't figure out. What were you thinking about?" I remembered that afternoon clearly. Jake had been exhausted from a long week of classes and work, and he dozed off halfway through some action movie we'd put on. I'd spent an hour just watching him sleep, memorizing the curve of his jaw, the way his eyelashes cast shadows on his cheeks, torturing myself with how much I wanted to reach out and touch him. "I was thinking about how beautiful you are," I said, feeling heat rise in my cheeks, "and how much I wanted to kiss you, and how pathetic I was for sitting there staring at my straight best friend like some kind of stalker." Jake's grip on my hand tightened. I wasn't asleep the whole time. My heart stopped. "What?" "I woke up about halfway through your staring session. I kept my eyes closed because I didn't know how to react to the way you were looking at me. It was so intense, so full of longing, and it made me feel things I didn't understand. I'd never had anyone look at me like that before." "Oh God," I groaned, mortified. "I'm so sorry. That must have been so uncomfortable for you." "It wasn't uncomfortable," Jake said quickly. "It was confusing, but not uncomfortable. It made me feel wanted in a way I'd never experienced. All my girlfriends, they looked at me like I was a prize they'd won or a conquest they'd made. But you looked at me like I was something precious, something worth cherishing. It scared me how much I liked it." The rain outside was beginning to ease, but neither of us seemed inclined to leave. The coffee shop had become our confessional, the place where years of secrets were finally being laid bare. "I have to ask," I said, "because I need to understand. If you've been questioning your sexuality for months, if you've been having these feelings about me, why didn't you say something sooner? Why wait until now?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing patterns on the back of my hand. "Because I was terrified of being wrong. What if this was just some weird phase? What if I was just confused because I was stressed about graduation and figuring out my life? I couldn't risk destroying our friendship over something I wasn't sure about." "And you're sure now?" "I'm sure about how I feel about you," he said firmly. "I'm sure that when I imagine my future, you're in it. Not just as my friend, but as something more. I'm sure that the thought of you being with someone else makes me crazy with jealousy." I'm sure that I'd rather figure out who I am with you than spend another day pretending to be someone I'm not. His words sent warmth flooding through my chest. This was really happening. After 3 years of hopeless longing, Jake was sitting across from me, holding my hand, telling me he wanted to be with me. There's something else, Jake said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Something I haven't told you yet. What? Last week, when you were at that journalism conference in Chicago, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about you being so far away, about how empty my apartment felt without you there. I realized that you're not just my best friend, Marcus. You're my person. You're the one I want to call when something good happens, the one I want to comfort me when things go wrong. You're the one I want to come home to at the end of every day. Tears pricked at my eyes. I dreamed of hearing words like these from Jake, but I'd never imagined they could feel this overwhelming when they finally came. I love you, Jake said simply. I don't know what label to put on myself, and I don't know what this makes me, but I know I love you. Not just as a friend, but as everything you are and everything you could be to me. I love you too, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I've loved you for so long, Jake. I never thought I'd get to say it back. Jake stood up suddenly, still holding my hand, and pulled me to my feet. Before I could ask what he was doing, he stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Can I kiss you? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Jake's free hand came up to cup my cheek, his thumb brushing across my skin with infinite gentleness. Then he leaned in, and his lips touched mine. The kiss was soft, tentative, nothing like the confident, practiced moves I'd seen him use with his girlfriends. This was Jake being vulnerable, being uncertain, being real. His lips were warm and slightly coffee-flavored, and when I kissed him back, I felt him sigh against my mouth. We broke apart after a moment, both breathing hard. Jake rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. Wow, he breathed. Yeah, I agreed, my heart racing. Wow, was that okay? He asked, suddenly uncertain again. I mean, I know I'm not exactly experienced with guys. I couldn't help but smile. Jake, that was perfect. More than perfect. Relief flooded his features. Good. Because I've been thinking about doing that for months, and I was terrified I'd mess it up. You didn't mess anything up, I assured him. Though we should probably sit back down before the barista starts staring. We settled back into our booth, but everything felt different now. The air between us was charged with possibility, with the electricity of new love finally acknowledged. Jake kept hold of my hand, his thumb tracing lazy circles on my palm. So what happens now? I asked, echoing his earlier question. I don't know, Jake admitted. I've never done this before. I've never been with a guy, never had to figure out how to navigate a relationship like this. I don't even know what to call myself. You don't have to call yourself anything, I said. Labels are just words. What matters is how you feel, what you want. What I want is you, Jake said without hesitation. I want to try this, whatever this is. I want to see where it goes. But I need you to be patient with me, Marcus. I'm going to make mistakes, probably say the wrong things sometimes. This is all new territory for me. It's new territory for both of us, I pointed out. I've never been in love with my best friend before either. I've never had to figure out how to transition from friendship to something more. We'll figure it out together. Jake smiled, that beautiful, genuine smile that had been making my heart skip beats for years. Together. I like the sound of that. There's one thing we need to talk about, though, I said, suddenly serious. Your family. Your friends. Are you ready for people to know? Because if we do this, if we try to make this work, people are going to notice. Jake's expression sobered. I've been thinking about that. My parents, they're not exactly the most progressive people in the world. My dad still makes jokes about gay people, and my mom keeps asking when I'm going to settle down with a nice girl and give her grandchildren. And your friends. Most of them would probably be okay with it, I think. But some of the guys from the baseball team. He shrugged. I don't know. I guess I'll find out who my real friends are. I squeezed his hand. We don't have to tell anyone right away. We can take this slow, figure things out privately first. Is that what you want? Jake asked. To keep this secret? I considered the question carefully. Part of me wanted to shout from the rooftops that Jake Morrison was finally mine, that after 3 years of hopeless pining, we were together. But another part of me understood his need for privacy, for time to adjust to this new reality. I want whatever makes you comfortable, I said finally. I've been keeping my feelings secret for 3 years. I can keep this secret for a while longer if that's what you need. Thank you, Jake said, relief evident in his voice. I just need some time to wrap my head around all of this, to figure out how to be myself in this new way. We talked for another hour, the conversation flowing as easily as it always had between us, but with an undercurrent of intimacy that was entirely new. Jake told me about the nights he'd lain awake thinking about me, about the way he'd started noticing other men in ways that confused and excited him. I told him about the torture of watching him with other people, about the careful masks I'd worn to hide my feelings. By the time we left the coffee shop, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and bright. We walked slowly back toward campus, reluctant to end this perfect, surreal afternoon. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said as we reached the corner where our paths usually diverged. "Always. Would you want to come back to my place? We could order pizza, watch a movie. Just be together. I'm not ready for this day to end." My heart swelled. I'd love that. Jake's apartment was familiar territory, a place I'd spent countless evenings over the years. But walking through his door now felt different, charged with new possibility. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed. We settled on his couch, closer than we'd ever sat before, my head resting on Jake's shoulder while he absently played with my hair. We'd ordered pizza but barely touched it, too caught up in the newness of being able to touch each other, to exist in the same space without pretense. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up," Jake murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "This feels too good to be real." "If you're dreaming, then I'm having the same dream," I replied, tilting my head to look up at him. He smiled and leaned down to kiss me again, longer this time, with more confidence. I felt his hand tangle in my hair, felt him pull me closer, and I thought my heart might burst from happiness. When we broke apart, Jake's eyes were dark with something I'd never seen directed at me before. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice rough. "I don't want to push too fast." "This is perfect," I assured him. "We'll go at whatever pace feels right." Jake nodded, then settled back against the couch cushions, pulling me with him until I was curled against his side. We stayed like that for hours, talking softly, sharing kisses, marveling at the fact that we were finally here, finally together. As the evening wore on, I found myself studying Jake's face, looking for signs of doubt or regret. But all I saw was contentment, a peace I'd rarely seen in him before. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, catching me staring. "Just you," I said honestly. "How different you seem. More relaxed, somehow." Jake considered this. "I feel different. Like I've been wearing a costume that didn't quite fit, and I finally get to take it off. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," I said, thinking about my own years of carefully constructed facades. "I keep wondering why it took me so long to figure this out," Jake continued. "All those relationships with women, all that time spent trying to be something I wasn't. How did I not know?" "Maybe you weren't ready to know," I suggested. "Maybe you had to go through all of that to get here." "Maybe." He was quiet for a moment. "Do you think we would have worked if I'd figured this out sooner? If I'd realized how I felt about you back in sophomore year when you first started having feelings for me?" I thought about it. "I don't know. We were different people then. Maybe we both needed to grow into who we are now before we could be ready for this." "I'm glad we're ready now," Jake said, pressing another kiss to my hair. "Me too." As the night deepened, we found ourselves talking about the future, about what we wanted our relationship to look like. Jake was honest about his fears, about his uncertainty regarding his sexuality and what it meant for his life. I was honest about my own insecurities, about my worry that he might decide this was all a mistake. "I can't promise I won't have moments of doubt," Jake said. "This is all so new, and I'm still figuring myself out. But I can promise that I want to figure it out with you. I can promise that what I feel for you is real, even if I don't have all the answers yet." "That's all I need," I said. "We'll figure out the rest as we go." Eventually, exhaustion began to set in. We'd been emotionally drained by the day's revelations, and the weight of everything that had changed was starting to catch up with us. "I should probably head home," I said reluctantly, not wanting to leave but knowing we both needed time to process everything that had happened. "Stay," Jake said quickly, then blushed at his own eagerness. "I mean, if you want to. We don't have to do anything, I don't want to be apart from you tonight. I want to wake up tomorrow and know this wasn't all a dream." I looked at him, this beautiful, vulnerable man who had just turned my world upside down in the best possible way, and I knew I couldn't leave either. "Okay," I said. "I'll stay." Jake's smile was radiant. "Really? Really?" He lent me a t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants, and we got ready for bed with an intimacy that was both foreign and completely natural. When we climbed into his bed, Jake immediately pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me like he was afraid I might disappear. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness. For what? For being patient with me. For loving me even when I was too stupid to see what was right in front of me. For being brave enough to tell me the truth tonight. Thank you for being brave enough to tell me the truth first, I replied. I never would have said anything if you hadn't. We lay in comfortable silence for a while, adjusting to the new reality of being in each other's arms. Jake's breathing gradually evened out, and I thought he'd fallen asleep until he spoke again. Marcus. Yeah, I love you. I know I said it before, but I wanted to say it again. I love you. I love you too, Jake. So much. He pressed a sleepy kiss to my shoulder, and within minutes, he was asleep. I lay awake a little longer, still hardly able to believe that this was real, that after 3 years of secret longing, I was finally where I'd always dreamed of being. When I woke up the next morning, Jake was already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching me with a soft smile. Good morning, he said, his voice rough with sleep. Good morning, I replied, suddenly shy in the morning light. No regrets? Jake asked, and I could hear the vulnerability in his question. None, I said firmly. You? None, he echoed, leaning down to kiss me gently. Just gratitude that we finally got here. We spent the morning in bed, talking and kissing and marveling at how natural it all felt. Jake was tentative at first, clearly uncertain about the physical aspects of being with a man, but his eagerness to learn, to please, to connect with me was evident in every touch. I never knew it could feel like this, he murmured against my lips after a particularly intense kiss. So right, so perfect. It's because it's us, I said. Because we know each other, trust each other, love each other. Is it always like this for you? With guys, I mean. I shook my head. Never. I've been with other men, but it was never like this. This is special, Jake. We're special. He smiled, that beautiful, genuine smile that had been my undoing for years. We are, aren't we? Over the following weeks, we settled into our new reality with surprising ease. To the outside world, we were still just best friends, but in private, we were exploring this new dimension of our relationship with wonder and joy. Jake was an eager student, asking questions about everything from the mechanics of gay relationships to the politics of coming out. He read articles online, bought books, immersed himself in learning about this part of himself he'd never acknowledged before. I feel like I'm making up for lost time, he told me one evening as we cuddled on his couch. Like I spent 22 years sleepwalking, and now I'm finally awake. I understood the feeling. Despite having been out for years, despite having had other relationships, being with Jake felt like discovering love for the first time. Every kiss, every touch, every quiet moment together felt precious and new. The secrecy was harder than I'd expected. We had to be careful about public displays of affection, had to maintain the facade of friendship when we were around others. There were moments when Jake would look at me across a crowded room with such love and longing that I was sure everyone could see it, but somehow our secret remained safe. How long do you think we can keep this up? I asked one night after a particularly difficult evening spent pretending to be just friends at a party. Jake was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I'm not ready to come out to everyone yet, but I hate having to hide how I feel about you. It feels like we're living a lie. We're living a lie, I said gently. But it's your choice when you're ready to stop. I know. And I appreciate your patience, I really do. I just wish I was braver. You were brave, I assured him. You were brave enough to tell me how you felt. You were brave enough to question everything you thought you knew about yourself. You were brave enough to risk our friendship for the chance at something more. That's incredibly brave, Jake. He pulled me closer, pressing his face into my neck. I love you so much, Marcus. Sometimes I think my heart might explode from how much I love you. I love you too, I whispered back. And whenever you're ready to tell the world, I'll be right there with you. The moment came sooner than either of us expected. We were at a campus bar with a group of friends, celebrating the end of finals week. Jake had been drinking more than usual, and I could see him getting more relaxed, more affectionate. He kept finding excuses to touch me, his hand lingering on my shoulder, his knee pressing against mine under the table. You two are being weird tonight, observed Sarah, one of our mutual friends. Weirder than usual, I mean. What do you mean? Jake asked, but I could hear the slight slur in his words. I don't know. You just seem different. Both of you. Like you're sharing some kind of secret. Jake and I exchanged glances, and I saw something shift in his expression. The alcohol had lowered his inhibitions, but more than that, I could see him making a decision. Actually, Jake said, his voice suddenly clear and determined, there is something we want to tell you guys. My heart started racing. This wasn't how we'd planned to do this. We talked about coming out gradually, starting with our closest friends, having careful conversations in private settings. Not like this, not in a crowded bar with half our social circle present. Jake, I said quietly, a warning in my voice. He looked at me, his eyes bright with love and alcohol and determination. I'm tired of hiding, Marcus. I'm tired of pretending you're just my friend when you're so much more than that. The table had gone quiet, everyone sensing that something significant was happening. I could feel their eyes on us, could practically hear their confusion. Jake, maybe we should. I'm gay, Jake announced, his voice carrying clearly over the noise of the bar. Or bi, or whatever. I don't know what label fits, but I know I'm in love with Marcus, and I'm tired of pretending I'm not. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched our friends' faces cycle through surprise, confusion, and gradual understanding. Some looked shocked. Others looked like pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place. Holy shit, someone whispered. Jake reached over and took my hand, right there in front of everyone. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, he said, addressing the table but looking at me. I was scared, and I was trying to figure myself out. But I can't keep hiding how I feel about the most important person in my life. I felt tears prick at my eyes. This wasn't how I'd imagined our coming out, but there was something beautiful about Jake's raw honesty, his refusal to hide anymore. How long? Asked Tom, one of Jake's teammates from the baseball team. Officially? A few weeks, Jake replied. But I think I've been in love with him for a lot longer than that. I was just too stupid to realize it. And you? Sarah asked, turning to me. How long have you known? That I'm gay? Since high school, I said, finding my voice. That I'm in love with Jake? 3 years. More silence. Then Tom started laughing. 3 years? Dude, you've been pining after him for 3 years? Pretty much, I admitted, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard, Sarah said, her eyes bright with tears. You guys, this is amazing. I mean, it explains so much. The way you look at each other, the way you're always together, the way neither of you ever seemed to click with anyone else you dated. The conversation continued around us, our friends asking questions, sharing their surprise and support, but I was focused on Jake. He was still holding my hand, his thumb tracing patterns on my palm, and he looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. You okay? I asked quietly. Better than okay, he replied. I feel free. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, questions, and the gradual adjustment of our friend group to this new reality. Most of our friends were supportive, even excited for us. A few seemed uncomfortable, but they kept their opinions to themselves. Tom, surprisingly, was one of our biggest supporters. I always wondered why you never seemed that into any of the girls you dated, he told Jake. Now it makes perfect sense. You were already in love with someone else. By the time we left the bar, word had spread to most of our social circle. Jake seemed energized by the experience, high on the rush of finally being honest about who he was. That wasn't so bad, he said as we walked back to his apartment. I mean, it wasn't how we planned it, but it felt good to finally tell people. Are you sure you're okay with how it happened? I asked. You were pretty drunk when you decided to come out to everyone. Jake stopped walking and turned to face me. I wasn't that drunk, Marcus. Maybe the alcohol gave me the courage to do it, but the decision was mine. I meant every word I said in there. He pulled me close, right there on the sidewalk, and kissed me deeply. It was our first truly public display of affection, and it felt revolutionary. I love you, he said against my lips, and I'm not hiding it anymore. The next few days brought a mix of reactions from the wider campus community. Most people were supportive or indifferent, but there were some negative responses as well. Jake received a few nasty messages on social media, and I heard whispers in the hallways that weren't entirely kind. But Jake seemed to take it all in stride, bolstered by the support of our real friends and the relief of finally being honest about who he was. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, he told me one evening as we studied together in the library. For the regret to set in, or for me to panic about what I've done. But it's not happening. If anything, I feel more like myself than I ever have before. No second thoughts about your sexuality? I asked, still sometimes unable to believe this was all real. None, Jake said firmly. I mean, I'm still figuring out the details, still learning about myself and what it means to be with a man. But I'm certain about you, Marcus. I'm certain about us. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. His certainty was infectious. The lingering doubts I'd harbored about whether this was just a phase for Jake, whether he might eventually decide he missed being with women, began to fade. This was real. We were real. As graduation approached, we had to face new challenges. Jake's parents were coming to town for the ceremony, and he'd decided it was time to tell them about us. He was nervous but determined, ready to be fully honest about who he was and who he loved. "What if they don't take it well?" he asked the night before they arrived. "Then we'll deal with it together," I replied. "But Jake, you're their son. They love you. They might need time to adjust, but they'll come around." "I hope you're right." The conversation with Jake's parents was difficult, but not as catastrophic as he'd feared. His mother cried, his father was silent for a long time, but eventually they both expressed their love for him and their desire to understand this new aspect of his life. It would take time, Jake knew, but it was a start. "They want to meet you properly," Jake told me afterward. "As their son's boyfriend, not just as his friend." "Are you up for that?" "Are you kidding?" I said, grinning. "I've been waiting 3 years to be introduced as your boyfriend. I'm definitely up for that." The dinner with Jake's parents was awkward at first, but gradually warmed as they saw how happy Jake was, how much we clearly loved each other. By the end of the evening, his mother was asking about our future plans and his father was offering career advice. "I think that went well," Jake said as we walked back to his apartment afterward. "Better than well," I agreed. "Your parents are good people, Jake. They love you, and they want you to be happy. That's what matters." Graduation day dawned bright and clear, and as we sat in our caps and gowns waiting for the ceremony to begin, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since that rainy afternoon in the coffee shop just a few months earlier. "Nervous?" Jake asked, noticing my distraction. "A little," I admitted. "About graduation, about the future, about what comes next for us." Jake took my hand, not caring who might see. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. That's all I need to know." I squeezed his hand, feeling the truth of his words settle into my bones. We'd found each other, finally and completely, and that was enough to face whatever the future might bring. As they called our names and we walked across the stage to receive our diplomas, I caught Jake's eye in the crowd. He was beaming, radiant with joy and pride and love, and I knew that this was just the beginning of our story together. After the ceremony, as we posed for pictures with family and friends, Jake's arm around my waist, I marveled at how natural it all felt. This was us now, openly and honestly us, and it was everything I'd ever dreamed it could be. "So what's next for you two?" asked Jake's mother as we gathered for lunch afterward. Jake and I exchanged glances. We'd been talking about the future a lot lately, making plans that included both of us. "We're moving to Chicago together," Jake announced. "Marcus got a job at a newspaper there, and I'm starting graduate school at Northwestern." "Together?" his father asked, and I could hear the question beneath the question. "Together," Jake confirmed, his voice steady and sure. "We're building a life together." His parents smiled, and I saw acceptance there, genuine happiness for their son's happiness. It was more than I'd dared to hope for. Later that evening, as we packed up Jake's apartment, preparing for our move to Chicago, I found myself thinking about that day in the coffee shop when everything changed. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been brave enough to tell me how you felt?" I asked Jake as we folded clothes into boxes. He paused in his packing and looked at me thoughtfully. "I try not to think about it, because it's too depressing. We might have spent years dancing around each other, both too scared to make the first move. We might have missed our chance entirely." "I'm glad you were brave," I said. "I'm glad you were patient," he replied. "I'm glad you waited for me to figure myself out, even when it took longer than it should have." "It was worth the wait," I said, meaning it completely. Jake crossed the room and pulled me into his arms. "I love you, Marcus. I love the life we're building together. I love that I get to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night. I love that we're not hiding anymore, that we get to be ourselves with each other and with the world." "I love you too," I said, kissing him softly. "All of you, including the parts you're still discovering." As we finished packing that night, preparing to start the next chapter of our lives together, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought us here. It hadn't been easy, loving someone who couldn't love me back, at least not in the way I needed. But it had led us to this moment, to this love that was deeper and more meaningful because of everything we'd been through to find it. Jake had been right that day in the coffee shop when he'd said he wanted to figure out who he was with me by his side. We were still figuring it out, both of us, learning how to be partners as well as best friends, learning how to navigate the world as an openly gay couple. But we were doing it together, and that made all the difference. The secret Jake had shared with me that rainy afternoon had indeed changed everything, but not in the way I'd feared. It had changed everything for the better, opening up possibilities I'd never dared to imagine. It had given us both the courage to be honest about who we were and what we wanted, and in doing so, it had given us each other. As we fell asleep that night in Jake's empty apartment, surrounded by boxes and dreams of our future together, I knew that this was just the beginning. We had a whole life ahead of us to explore, to grow, to love each other more deeply with each passing day. And it all started with a secret shared between best friends on a stormy afternoon, a secret that had the power to change everything.